Resisting Trump. Let's put Hardball. Two huge stories tonight. First, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said Trump used him, that he gave Trump cover, the alibi, to fire FBI Director James Comey. Second, the resistance emerges to Trump as he grabs a chance to shape the Supreme Court for generations, and by doing so, drive his own re-election. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. As the only person with ultimate authority over the special counsel's probe, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is the only person standing out there between President Trump and Robert Mueller. His defense of Mueller and the Justice Department have made him a prime target of the right wing. However, Rosenstein was also instrumental to the White House in May of last year when President Trump decided to fire FBI Director James Comey. It was Rod Rosenstein who ultimately drafted that memo that the president used to justify Comey's firing. In an explosive story tonight, the New York Times is now reporting that Rosenstein told colleagues he believed he was used. Quote, in the days after the FBI Director James Comey was fired last year, Rosenstein repeatedly expressed anger about how the White House used him to rationalize the firing, saying the experience damaged his reputation, according to 4 people familiar with his outbursts. Well, those sources described the Deputy Attorney General as seemingly conflicted. Quote, Rosenstein alternately defended his involvement, expressed remorse at the tumult it unleashed, and said the White House had manipulated him. However, if Rosenstein did feel manipulated, there may be good reason. That's because the president's behavior in the days that followed Comey's firing suggested he used Rosenstein's memo as an alibi. Rather than cite the memo, Trump told Lester Holt, however, that the Russia investigation was the reason he fired Comey.
But regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
Oh, yeah, good. Well, the president also met with Russian diplomats in the Oval Office, and he repeatedly told them, I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off. Well, it was after those statements that Rosenstein appointed the special counsel to oversee the probe. According to the New York Times, upon learning of the appointment, Mr. Trump erupted in anger, saying he needed someone overseeing the investigation who would be loyal to him. I'm joined right now by the author of this new New York Times report, Michael Schmidt of the Times, who's also an MSNBC contributor. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee. And Barbara McQuaid is a former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. I want to start with Michael about this. This is a hell of a story because it talks about how what we thought at the time that Rosenstein was doing what the president wanted him to do, but not what he thought was really the whole story.
Rosenstein had been Deputy Attorney General for a week and a half when this happens. The president wanted to send this letter to Jim Comey that said why he wanted to get rid of him. The White House counsel saw it, Don McGahn. He said, this is not a good idea. We need to come up with a cleaner reason for this. The president's letter was rambling. It went on, and it also mentioned Russia, the Russia investigation. So McGahn brings in Sessions and Rosenstein. Rosenstein offers to write this memo. The memo is ultimately the main argument the White House uses to explain the Comey firing. They stand on the White House lawn the night of the firing, and they read from the letter and explain to people that Comey had to go because he was too harsh on Hillary Clinton.
If you're Robert Mueller and his associates, and you now realize, or you've realized now for months perhaps, that Rosenstein felt he was used, and he didn't feel he was being accurate and certainly at all honest about the reasons for the firing, what would that tell you about obstruction of justice?
Well, Mueller's known this probably for a year. This is nothing that is that
But the public didn't know it.
The public did not know it. But this is the thing. This is a very important period of time. It's a little more than a week between when Comey is fired and Mueller is appointed. And what Trump defenders and Trump's lawyers would say, well, Rosenstein was more than happy to be part of the Comey firing, and then several days later appoints Mueller to investigate the same thing that he was a part of. He's now overseeing it, and he's a chief witness in this.
Well, let me go to the congressman on this. First of all, Congressman Swalwell, thank you for joining us from Stanford out there. What do you make of the fact that now we know on the record from the New York Times, this hell of a report here, that Rosenstein knew and said so at the time he was used, that wasn't the reason for the firing of Comey. The reason was probably Russia and the cover-up.
Of course the president used him, Chris. The president uses everyone around him, and right now he's trying to fool the American people that he really cares about them. It's always been about Donald Trump. I don't believe Rod Rosenstein should recuse himself. This is a question that he has posed to the Department of Justice. I believe he was sincere when he asked them if he should recuse themselves, and they have advised that he shouldn't. So Republicans now have a real interest in whether he should be recused. We saw that at our Judiciary Committee hearing, but that's not because they want to make sure that this investigation is done right. It's because they want to delay, obstruct, and do everything they can to stop Bob Mueller from making the progress he needs to make in this investigation. And now we must insist that Rosenstein and Mueller stay, and if Rosenstein is fired, it would be treated the same as if Mueller were fired.
Barbara, it always seemed to me, and I think to most people following this whole Russia investigation, at the heart of an obstruction, and if you want to believe there was obstruction, was the firing of Comey, because Comey was coming at this president. And the president got rid of Comey because of that reason. He came up with other reasons, thanks to the help of Rosenstein, who agreed, as Deputy Attorney General, to craft a memo that suggested, in fact, claimed it wasn't a cover-up. It was really just because it had something to do with other issues, the way that Comey treated Hillary Clinton in the campaign, etc. What's this mean to an obstruction investigation?
Yeah, I think this is one more piece of evidence that could add to a theory of obstruction of justice. You know, when someone lies about something they did or offers a pretext for something they did, it causes you to wonder if they are not hiding their consciousness of guilt. I know what I did was wrong, therefore I have to come up with a lie that explains the real reason. Whenever there's a jury question on obstruction of justice, and in this instance maybe it would be a Senate question, whoever is the fact finder, they're told in their instructions that because no one can read someone else's mind to determine what was in someone's mind and their intent, you have to look at all of the facts and circumstances, the totality of the circumstances, what a person said and did. So I think this is one more item on the list that Robert Mueller can point to about what was said and done that could add to the mix to establish obstruction of justice and that corrupt intent that's necessary.
One more item on the list. Anyway, to the congressman's earlier point, Rosenstein was asked if he would recuse himself after overseeing the special counsel's probe because of his role in Comey's firing. Let's watch what he said.
Seems like you should be recused from this more so than Jeff Sessions, just because you were involved in making decisions affecting both prongs of this investigation. Why haven't you done that?
Congressman, I can assure you that if it were appropriate for me to recuse, I'd be more than happy to do so and let somebody else handle this, but it's my responsibility to do it.
Well, there we have a problem there. Michael Schmidt, you're reporting today. What is it going to do? It seems like in the kind of almost twisted way in which the opposition to this investigation have operated, they might say, well, you know, the fact that this Rosenstein was upset about the fact he was used by the president biased him to the point when he went out and hired Robert Mueller to investigate the president. I know how they think. But it's another Benghazi to them, another weird rabbit hole to go down.
But this shows all the different sort of roles that Rosenstein is playing at the same time. Despite the fact that he was part of the Comey firing in favor of doing that, you have Representative Swalwell, a Democrat, saying we really need to keep him around. For the Democrats, they think he's their best bet, and they're afraid of what Trump would put at the top of the justice. That's sort of their red line for them. Yeah. I don't know if they can enforce the red line. They don't have the power to do that, but they keep on saying, oh, you can't do that.
Well, Congressman, to that point, it seems to me, as we're sitting around here with the producers today for this program, we're trying to figure out what stops this president from getting rid of Mueller. What stops him is Rod Rosenstein and Jeff Sessions to some extent, but mainly Rosenstein, who appointed him. Is that true, and is that why the Republicans on your committee and elsewhere seem to always be targeting Rosenstein from a variety of directions?
Yeah, first, Chris, they're trying to put an asterisk on this investigation should it bring more indictments, especially if it hits the president or his family. But what stops the president is public sentiment. He wants to be popular. He wants to be liked. That is more important than doing the right thing. We saw that when it came to separating mothers from their children at the border. Only because it became unpopular did he do the right thing. And I think he fears, because the American people have been quite loud about this, and the public polling shows this, that if he were to fire Mueller or if he were to fire Rosenstein, that Republicans would move on him and they would view view that as obstruction of justice. I fear, though, that the committee that would have to hold him responsible first, the House Judiciary Committee, is lost because they're doing all they can right now to make sure that he has a green light to fire Mueller and Rosenstein.
Well,
but more senior members are not with him.
Nunes means do nothing. Anyway, do you think if he were to fire a Mueller or try to fire Rosenstein rather, that would Nixonize him? Trump?
Yes. Yes.
As I mentioned, go ahead.
To the leadership in the Republican Party, I believe that is their own red line, because that's also where the public is on this. And the polling, again, reflects that. But the House Judiciary Committee, they are his fixers in Congress. That is, about 20 Michael Cohens sitting there trying to fix this investigation in the president's favor.
Well, it must be great sitting next to them. By the way, I thought it was interesting they separate the staffs, the minority and the majority staffs, by some kind of partition. Do you think that was part of the effort so they could go about their business of saving this president's neck without your committee and staff people getting involved?
Yes, they have taken away the bipartisan comedy that we've had in prior Congresses, again, solely to protect the president, not to protect the democracy or the ballot box in our future elections. And I think they're going to pay a price in November, Chris, because people just want someone to push the big red button that stops the wrecking ball. That's Donald Trump.
Well, as I mentioned, this comes as Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, finds himself under attack by House Republicans seeking to undermine him or otherwise sabotage this whole Russian probe. In that Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday, Republicans who have effectively swamped the Justice Department with document requests accused Rosenstein of hiding information from them. Here's a tense exchange with Congressman Jim Jordan, one of the
Mr. Rosenstein,
Tea Partiers.
why are you keeping information? Mr. Rosenstein, why are you keeping information from Congress?
Congressman, I'm not keeping any information from Congress.
I want to know why you won't give us what we've asked for.
Sir, I certainly hope that your colleagues are not under that impression. That is not accurate, sir. And
it is accurate. We have caught you hiding information.
Your statement that I'm personally keeping information from you, trying to conceal information.
You're the boss, Mr. Rosenstein.
That's correct. And my job is to make sure that we respond to your concerns. We have, sir.
Well, even Congressman Trey Gowdy, who once defended the special counsel, piled on there, urging Rosenstein to expedite the Mueller investigation. Here he goes.
We've seen the bias. We've seen the bias. We need to see the evidence. If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart.
I've heard suggestions that we should just close the investigation. I think the best thing we can do is finish it appropriately and reach a conclusion.
Well, Gowdy, that's Congressman Gowdy's criticism of the pace of the Russia probe is disingenuous at best. As the chairman of the Benghazi Committee, remember that one? Gowdy spent 2.5 years investigating Hillary Clinton, which concluded without a single indictment. It got nowhere because there was nowhere to go. In contrast, the Mueller probe has gone on for a little more than a year and has already produced Mueller 20 indictments. I want to go back to Congressman Swalwell, who's the politician here. This reminds me of an era of the Nixon probe, which led to the removal of the president by resignation. There was an era toward the end when the Nixon defenders, a small cadre still around, began to say, get off his back, leave him alone. Rabbi Korf was this conservative churchman who basically led the cause. It became almost ludicrous. I've noticed that with 90% of Republican voters supporting Trump now, that people like Gowdy, even the guys like he, are jumping aboard the last chance saloon here.
That's right, Chris. But again, the American people want to see this investigation concluded. However, to Mr. Gowdy, I would say, when you lie to investigators, when you tamper with witnesses, as Paul Manafort has done, and when you refuse to sit in the chair, even when you've been given the questions that the FBI wants to ask you, it's going to take longer. So if you do that, we could finish it the hell up.
Is the president going to testify this year or not?
No, I don't think he would.
And one more thing.
No, I don't see him ever doing that. He's never met the truth in his life, and he does
You're
not
doing
want to
meet the president.
Thank you so much, Michael Schmidt. Great reporting, as always. U.S. Congressman Eric Swalwell out in Stanford and Barbara McQuaid. We rely on your expertise. Coming up with President Trump on the attack, it's time for the resistance to fight back, don't you think? Democrats are facing a 5-alarm fire now when it comes to the Supreme Court. Even President Obama's out there warning about this and warning his party personally. Plus, new reporting that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly's on his way out the door. It's no wonder Trump's apparently decided that his own instincts, think about that, his instincts are better than anyone else's thoughts. And he's sick of having a hall monitor. And further proof today that the president's looking for someone to be his trumpet. A Fox News executive, isn't that great, is set to become communications director. The